Embarking on a 1,200-mile journey, mostly on foot, is not for the faint of heart, but for best-selling author Timothy Egan, making the pilgrimage from England to Rome felt necessary. In his book, Pilgrimage to Eternity, Egan says he was looking for answers about his own faith, the role of faith in society, and along the way, wrestled with a devastating event in his own family. Please welcome New York Times columnist, National Book Award, and Pulitzer Prize winner Timothy Egan. It's good to see you.
It's great to be with you.
I just finished the book yesterday, and I loved it because I felt like I went along on your journey, but you invite us to ask ourselves some big questions as well.
Right, so it's a physical journey. This was the
Are your toes okay?
Yeah, I mean, they finally recovered. My quad is not okay. I pulled. That's why they call it a quad. You got 4 of them. I pulled one. It was really, really awful. My blisters were horrible. It was a tough thing, but I was trying to force some issues. I not only wanted to see this fabulous pilgrimage trail, which dates to 990. It was once the most prominent pilgrimage trail of the Middle Ages, and 1 million people made this journey from Canterbury to Rome. And now it's the European Cultural Institute has made it one of its prominent trails for pilgrims.
What is the name of it?
It's called the Via Francigena.
I mean, it's so beautiful. And people did it then in whatever they wore on their feet. Can you imagine?
You know, one of the places I stopped over was to see what they wore on their feet. I had world-class shoes from REI.
Right.
I still got blisters. And they had these little thin-soled things that made me appreciate what they did. And there was danger looking at every corner, too.
Right. Really amazing thing. What made you do this?
So, you know, I'm at a certain age in my life where I wanted to force some issues. I think every one of us, we're spiritual human beings, but we stopped thinking about some of these issues for a while. And after the death of my mother, which was very hard and very sudden, she died of a glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. She's a very devout person of faith. And I literally held her hand as she passed away. And she said, I don't know what's in the next world. And it sort of got me thinking about questions that, you know, I'd stopped thinking about for a long time. Right. So that was the first thing.
Did you feel like she was having doubts about her faith at that point?
Yes, she was having doubts. A very devout person on her deathbed suddenly having doubts. And it made me realize that, you know, I'd been very lazy with my thinking. That, again, we're all spiritual, but we let these things go. It doesn't matter what your orientation is spiritually, but we let these things go. So that was the first thing. I love history. I'm a historian. I've written a lot about, you know, the Dust Bowl, and I'm an Irishman, and this is a chance to look at the history of a faith, of Christianity itself, by going through these amazing shrines where all these extraordinary events happen. A king is crowned here with oil from a dove from heaven. Joan of Arc spent the night here while getting ready to take on the English. St. Francis of Assisi performed a miracle here, and it's all glorious. So I wanted to touch this history. So that was the second thing. And just try to come to grips with some of these bigger questions.
And as you're wrestling with this, you're also reflecting on how society is coming to grips with these things, that we're seeing this hollowing out of this history and this faith in Britain, in Europe, and to some degree in the U.S. What did you learn about that?
Yeah, Margaret, we really are at a historic moment in terms of faith right now. Christianity has shaped the Western world, as one historian said, probably more than anything at all in the 2,000 years. But Europe has never been so secular. Half the people in Britain right now do not believe in God. But what's growing is Africa and China. So Christianity is growing robustly so, as are other faiths, outside of Europe. So Europe is hollowing out. And so one of my motivations was sort of to, as I said, I wanted to see God in Europe before God in Europe is gone. You know, and I wondered, would there come a time when we would look at these fabulous monuments, these extraordinary cathedrals, these great shrines, and say, what was that all about?
Yeah, why are they there?
Stonehenge, you know, look at it. So it's a moment where this faith is literally slipping away.
We have some pictures that you took along the way, which are just amazing. But one of the stories you told about something you saw just involved shoes. And I wondered if you could tell us about that story.
You mean about the shower shoes?
No, not about the shower shoes, but the shoes that have been left as wishes for healing.
Right. So, you know,
although the shower shoes, you'll have to mention what that is now, too.
So, you know, I'm a journalist by profession. I'm a skeptic by profession, but I'm an Irish Catholic by culture. And so I struggle with my rational side, with my emotional side. And I was in Saint-Omer, France, early on in the Via Francigena, you know, going to these places. I went to this library and held books created by monks 1,000 years ago, when it took 2 years for one person to make a book. I was sort of moved by that. I mean, I was struggling with these sort of logical issues. Then I go to this church and I see this tomb from about 1,200 years ago, Saint Erkenbohm. He was the saint who walked, and there's all these shoes, little kids' shoes, little Velcro straps, little stuff, all placed atop this tomb. I said, what's that all about? Well, children who are disabled and have trouble walking put their shoes atop this tomb in the hope that something will happen. Right. And for some of them, something does happen. And it moved me to tears. And it was an example of how faith is something you can't define in the logical realm. Faith is something you can't always define in the rational realm. So my journalism side, my skeptical side was just pushed away by the overwhelming power of people hoping for a miracle by putting these tiny shoes atop this crypt of this saint who's been dead for more than 1,200 years.
And the centuries and centuries of belief,
exactly,
that's in our collective consciousness.
No, and it just made me shiver. That's a very good point. Of thinking of all the people who stared into that or put their little shoes on that and hoped for something.
I know, I'm with you.
Now, by the way, I looked this up then, I went back to my rational side. 80% of Americans believe in miracles. So it's not something, you dismiss it as a superficial thing, but there's been all kinds of scientific studies of Lourdes and things like that, and there's something they consider inexplicable.
Right. And I think our logical side also invites us to be open to the things we can't explain, doesn't it? I mean, when you get right down to it, there's a lot we don't understand. I don't understand the French language, but that doesn't mean it's not a language, right?
Right. So I was really moved by something
things.
that St. Augustine said, and I was wrestling with him and others when I was doing my pilgrimage, and he said, miracles are not necessarily contrary to nature, but they're contrary to what we know about nature.
Okay, that's
which made
so
a lot of
interesting.
sense. Yeah.
So you shared part of the journey with your kids, your son and daughter, and then at the end with your wife. What did it mean to have your kids come with you for part of this?
It was very important, and it made so I was raised as an Irish Catholic. My wife is Jewish, so we have two conflicting.
You have a melting pot.
Right, exactly. And then our kids, we were sort of raised. We thought they would find the answers on their own if we didn't try to press them any one way, and it was really fascinating. It made me realize that as a parent, I hadn't given them enough of just sort of the spiritual canon so that they could understand all the metaphors of life.
Yeah.
The Archbishop of Canterbury said something when I started. He said, you can't understand religion. You can't understand the world today if you don't understand religion. And I think, in our effort to be fair, we didn't give them enough to have a structural balance. Now, they also kept me straight and clean and slapped me around when I got a little too goofy, and went off message and all of that. So it was really terrific. My daughter speaks good Italian, so that was helpful. And my son really likes to find great places to eat at night, so that was helpful.
I loved him. I thought I want to travel with him.
And that's one of the great things about the Via Francigena, and I encourage anyone who's ever wanted to go on a pilgrimage, skip the Camino de Santiago, which a lot of people go on in Spain, more than 1 million people. Go to the less known Via Francigena. Not only is it spectacular, not only is it moving, the food at the end of the day, after you've burned 3,000 calories.
And you can eat anything you want.
Eat anything you want. It was so glorious at the end of the day. And so I would be arguing or discussing with my daughter or my son or my wife or a fellow pilgrim at the end of the day over just a wonderful meal.
It's a beautiful book. I think it invites us to think about things that sometimes, as you say, in our busy lives, we let go. And you also mentioned that you're a lapsed Catholic, lapsed but listening. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think a lot of people are going to relate to that. Thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. Love it. Tim speaks tonight at Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. We'll have full ticket information on our website for you. We'll be right back. Thank you so much.